first I want to take time out to ask you, how are you holding up in the middle of, we literally have an uprising in the middle of a pandemic. So how have you been?
You know, I've been taking it all in stride. I have my days where I feel completely overwhelmed. I have my days when I feel fired up and I'm activated and strategizing. And then I have my days where I'm just sort of in the middle and lost for words and not really sure what to do. So it's a mixed bag.
Definitely. And Prideland is such a unique series. It's not a unique experience. Like, I'm also from the South. I'm from North Carolina. I live in New York now, but it's definitely something that hits home a lot. So how did you get involved with this project?
Yeah, so the production company Tiny Horse, along with PBS, decided that they wanted to do something, for Pride Month. And I'm friends with one of the folks who works at Tiny Horse, and so they put my in a list of queer identified folks to potentially host this project. And so they reached out to me and asked me if I'd be interested, and I asked a lot of questions because hosting is not necessarily what I set out to do. And we started having conversations, and I realized that this was something that I really wanted to be a part of, something that I really felt like I needed to do. The sort of driving force behind everything that I do is about telling stories that are gonna push the narrative forward about who we are as Black people, who we are as queer people, who we can be as men. And so that it just fell right in line with sort of the work that I want to do as a storyteller.
And not only are you bringing to light the stories of other people, but the series kicks off with your own story. How was this experience in bringing your story to this platform in this way?
It was, I was nervous about it. I'm not gonna lie. I have sort of talked about some of my personal history in different interviews, but I never went as in depth as I went for Prideland. And I actually, there's a lot more that didn't get put in the project that, and so, but it was nerve-wracking. I mean, as an actor, you are accustomed to telling someone else's story. And in some ways, you're telling your own story through someone else's life circumstances. But this it was me retelling my life story, and so and my personal history. And so that was kind of scary because I've never done anything quite like that before, quite as revealing as they were asking me to. But it was liberating too. I think that so often we are asked to deny parts of ourselves. We're asked to leave pieces of ourselves at the door. In Black spaces, I'm often asked to leave my queerness at the door. In queer spaces, and in many spaces in the world, I'm asked to leave my Blackness at the door. But I think that, to deny one piece of yourself is to deny all of who you are. And I'm really interested in becoming much more, authentic in the way that I show up in life and in the world.
Yeah. Is there a particular episode or story that struck a chord with you specifically?
Throughout the Prideland series?
Yeah.
Oh, there's so many. I related to so many of the stories, and actually, to be honest, the reason why we decided to include some of my personal story is because as we were going through the list of potential folks to interview for the series and for the broadcast special that's airing on the PBS channel, I mentioned that like so many of the people's stories were parallel to things that had happened in my life or my own personal experiences. So that's how my personal story got put into the project at all. But, so I just, there's so many of them that I related to. I think one that really sort of struck a chord with me personally was speaking to a woman named Mary Jane Kennedy, who found out that not only was one of her sons gay, but two of them, and they both came out to her at the same time. And it was really difficult for her as a Southern Baptist woman living in Mississippi, a Sunday school teacher. And, you know, so much of my story wasn't exactly the same, but so much of what that experience was for her resonated for me, you know, growing up in the church and working in the church and, you know, being Southern and having to have conversations, uncomfortable conversations with your family. It was just a really, really touching story about the love of a mother. And my mother loves me the way that Miss Mary Jane loves her kids. And so I could also relate to that too. So it's just great to talk to her.
Yeah. What do you think people would take away from this series? Or if there was a key takeaway that people would learn from watching this series? You know, I'm sure PBS does have like a pretty good amount of conservative watchers who will probably stumble upon this just like watching it soon. So what do you think there's one thing that you think that they would take away from it?
I hope, especially with it airing in this time in our nation's history, that it will inspire folks to get involved in the collective liberation of all of us. I hope that it will inspire folks who maybe have no real understanding about queer people, who don't think they know queer people, because you all know queer and trans people who know it or not. Folks who don't think they know those folks, I hope that it is a wake-up call for them, and it introduces them to people, real stories. You know, Bayard Rustin says you have to join every other movement for the freedom of people. And I think right now it's more clear than ever how important that is for us to realize that my freedom as a Black man is inextricably bound to the freedom of queer and trans folks, and vice versa. And the freedom of our freedom is wrapped up in the freedom of the white woman sitting in an office in corporate America who's trying to move up the corporate ladder. It's all connected. And so I hope that this sort of allows people to get to know folks who they wouldn't otherwise get to meet, and create a space for more empathy.
Awesome. And I can't speak with you without asking about Pose. How far did you all get into season 3 before the pandemic came? And is there anything that you can tease about what we can expect from the upcoming season?
Well, I'll say we didn't get very far at all. We, you know, we had just started production in March. I think it was March, maybe late February. But we had really just started to get in a groove, and we were really excited about the season that we had prepared for you. I was really excited about some of the things that were coming up for Ricky, and you know, I have, you know, I wouldn't, even if I did know, I wouldn't be able to tell you. But what I will say is I think it's going to be really difficult for the industry in general to address some of the concerns that COVID-19 presents, especially with a show like Pose, you know, that has these ball scenes that require us to have up to sometimes 200 people in a room together. And so, like, how do you convince people that they're safe to do that? That is that's a really hard thing to ask. And so I don't know, I don't know how we will address that. But I think that's a question that industry-wide we're gonna have to try and figure out. What do scenes depicting intimacy look like? You know, Billy Porter and I had a really sort of what people were calling a groundbreaking scene.
The scene heard around the world. The scene.
In season 2, I don't know that would be possible in a world just post-COVID. And so what does that look like? How do we continue to tell the stories, the love stories in our show? So what I'm sure of is that we have brilliant writers and producers who are sensitive to what's going on right now in our world, and that they will make the right decisions to make sure that their cast and crew are safe, but also to honor the storytelling in a way that lives up to what people expect to pose.
Cool. And one final question, especially, I guess at the beginning of the pandemic, people were still searching for ways to practice self-care, but even more so now with protesting and the uprisings and stuff. What are some ways that you're practicing self-care? And are there any shows that you're binge watching right now?
I would love to be binge watching. I started Homecoming.
Oh yeah.
My girl Janelle, and was really enjoying it, and then the whole world blew up, and so I haven't been able to really engage with watching TV or movies or anything like that, just because everything that I'm sort of digesting right now is sort of educational. I'm reading a book called Unapologetic by Charlene Carruthers, who's one of the founding members of BYP 100. Shout out to Charlene. And a couple of other things. I just rewatched both the Marsha P. Johnson documentary and the Bayard Rustin documentary, both really good films to watch if you can get your hands on them. Just to sort of like wrap my head around some of the ways in which people have been fighting for collective liberation over the years. Queer folks, Black folks have been fighting for it, to learn from and glean from. And so that's sort of where my head's been, and the kind of content that I'm consuming at this moment. In terms of my self-care, I have to make sure I get outside every day. That's been important for me throughout the course of the quarantine. And so I'm grateful that I decided to come down south and spend time with family instead of being locked up in my apartment in New York. I
definitely envy.
But yeah, I get outside every day and walk around and soak up some fresh air and put my toes in the grass. That's really healing for me. My morning time, my gratitude, I do something called the paradigm shift that's really therapeutic and like helps sets the tone for my day. That's sort of part of my self-care practices, working out, and just taking a break from it all when I need to, and just kind of trying to be silent when I can.
That's a good plan. I know for me, I've been having to like watch TV and films because that's what we do. But I've been trying to read a lot on defunding and abolishing the police because it's a big movement right now. And honestly, before this, I really wasn't, thinking a lot about it. But it's like this whole movement and uprising is really causing us to think a lot differently. Like things aren't working, and how can we fix things? So I think definitely that's a good idea to watch films and documentaries on people who were in these movements before us.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the only way that we can learn. There's so many people outside of the sort of cisgender, heterosexual, respectable men that who we all know and love, who were the sort of faces of the civil rights movement. There's so many femme and queer Black folks like Bayard Rustin and Marsha P. Johnson and Ella Baker, who have been a part of the movement for collective liberation and been fighting for Black lives and femme lives and queer lives. And so it's important for us to know that part of our history too, which is why something like Prideland is important. You have to be introduced to these people. I think, which is why Pose is important. You need to be able to see that these people exist. Like I said earlier, I can't deny one part of my existence. I got on my Color of Change shirt with all of
I got a sweatshirt just like a Sundance
Black heroes, and then I got my queer socks on. You can't, it's all of the things.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely hope that at least this is sparking, and I think the pandemic also has a lot to do with it too. Like, people actually like at a standstill right now, so it's like you have no other choice but to at least try to look and see what's going on and see it through different lenses, and hopefully, it sucks that had it happen during a global health crisis, but at least people are actually paying attention.
Yeah, and it's the perfect time, and it's the perfect time for us to heal. One more thing I'll say, Charlene Carruthers, she makes this point in Unapologetic. She says something like, when marginalized people take on big fights, everybody can benefit. And so it's like, this is what's happening in the streets right now is not, yes, it's about Black lives, but it's about all of us. This is which is what's been so encouraging about the allies who have shown up in real ways and not in performative ways, that they recognize and realize this is for all of us. And I think that we have to realize that about our trans brothers and sisters too. I think I've just got so many different quotes and thoughts in my head. When I was watching the Bayard Rustin documentary, he made a statement during the 1979 March on Washington for lesbian and gay rights. He said that, there was once a time where Black folks were sort of the barometer for human rights in this country. And he said that in that moment, the barometer were those who identified as homosexual, lesbian, bisexual. Now I think that barometer is Black trans women. When Black trans women are free, and I don't mean the kind of free that they have told us that Black people are free all of these years. When Black trans women are truly free, that's when we're all free.